Greetings, Soulswind here, and welcome to episode 2 of Let's Play Total Annihilation. Previously, we've completed mission 1 of the core campaign and rescued the core commander, and we are moving on to mission 2, called Vermin, as shown here. Well, we left off at the score screen of mission 1, and I made a save there after the video ended. But if I load it from there, it's actually going to push us right into mission 2's briefing. So here goes. Difficulty still remains on hard, and let's proceed.
The core was surprised by the arms having reached the planet's surface without detection. Central consciousness, an enormous collection of linked minds located on Core Prime itself, directed that the planetary security mind cluster be scanned for anomalies. Meanwhile, armed forces continued to appear in increasing numbers. The core commander, now reactivated, immediately launched into action.
Mission 2.2 Core Intel. A nest of armed vermin has been located. They have established an untidy Kbot lab in Plaza B206. Build a base and a vehicle plant. Produce sufficient units to eradicate the armed vermin. Build a vehicle plant and destroy all of the armed units. Do so now. Alrighty, like before, the wind speed here does not affect us in this mission. So, let's proceed. Okay, unpause and let's go. This is the commander. Before I introduce the units to you, let's start by building something. I like to build along walls so that it's neater. Alright, let me just check my game speed and put it back to 4 by pressing the minus key. The solar collector that I'm building right now produces energy, and that is critical to producing other structures and eventually units. In addition to that, we'll need to build metal extractors as well. I like to build them in a line, although that's not advisable because of area of effect damages. Okay, as you can see here, I'm placing even metal extractors in a line because we are on a metal map, and there is no concern about where you place the metal extractor. It's all at the same efficiency. That will be explained in a short while. So let me just produce some of these resource production structures, and then we'll make a vehicle lab that will start producing units. Yeah, it seems okay, I guess. I think now's a good time to start talking about the resource system. So yeah, I'll explain the resource system right now while the game is going on. Total Annihilation uses a very unique resource system as compared to many other real-time strategy games. There are two types of resources, metal and energy. Metal is generally used for construction. Meanwhile, energy can be used for construction, unit movement, and many other functions. First, let's start by understanding the numbers in the resource bar. There's resource storage space, indicated by the white number above the resource quantity bar. The resource currently owned is indicated by the white number below the resource quantity bar. The resource quantity bar itself also provides a good indication of how much resources you have remaining. An empty or short resource quantity bar certainly looks very worrying. The resource production rate is indicated by the green number with a plus sign, while the resource consumption rate is indicated by the red number with a minus sign. Both buildings and units can contribute to the resource production and resource consumption. Now comes the interesting part. Total Annihilation handles resource production and resource consumption in a very different way. Instead of having workers harvesting resources in lump sums and constructions consuming resources in lump sums, resources are calculated by the rate at which they are produced and consumed. When the production rate exceeds the consumption rate, the accumulated resources increases. Conversely, if the consumption rate exceeds the production rate, the accumulated resources decreases. Thus, the more resource storage space there is and the more resources stored, the more bandwidth there is for coping with emergencies, such as when the production facility has been destroyed by the enemy. Alrighty, back to the game. So, we've already seen some attacks on our bases and some of the enemies have come to our base. We managed to fend them off while in the meantime we lost one of the metal extractors. One thing you'll notice is that there's this wreckages here, and I actually reclaimed one of them. The wreckage is actually dead units or dead buildings. So when you kill off something, or when the enemy kills off something, it doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it does, depending on the type of damage, such as using the commander's D-gun, but generally there may be some corpses left behind, or rather dead units, also known as wreckages, as you can see here. Each of this wreckage actually provides metal to you if you actually assign some construction unit to reclaim it, such as the commander. So it's quite helpful to reclaim some of these wreckages when you're running low on metals. Alright, I'm just getting some more metal extractors and solar collectors. Alright, how do I queue up these construction is that I hold on to the shift key and then I click on the building that I want to place and just click on the map. Place it and then click on the same spot or roughly the same spot again to cancel it. So yeah, that's shift queuing production. Again, control 1 or control X being the number to group your units. Oops, that's not good. Will I lose my structure? It looks like the units from the enemy side is mostly targeting the commander. They're like actively looking out for the commander, so it's okay, I can take some damage. The D-gun will do friendly damage, so friendly fire, boom, that's it. Okay, never mind, the enemy is dead and I'm just destroying my own. Hotkey O for orders here, or just pressing O, and repair is the R key. When you hover over wreckage, it automatically goes to the reclaim cursor. But you can also click on E for reclaim, and you can even reclaim all your own structures or units. Thanks for coming by, AK. Yep, so I'll replace that one with a new one, and we can produce more units right now. Okay, perhaps it's a good time to start introducing our units and buildings. So before I begin, I'd first like to thank the File Universe for providing the font used by Total Annihilation. Please pardon my pronunciation. I think the name of the font is Hayden Schuyler. The other numbers were obtained from screenshots of the resource bar at opportune moments. In addition, I'd like to thank Chugga Conroy for inspiring this stats page. The idea first originated from the Pokemon bio when watching Chugga Conroy's Pokemon Let's Plays. Thank you, Chugga Conroy. Now let's see what new buildings and new units we can produce in this mission. Well, let's accept the commander. However, this is the first time we can control it, so it will be introduced here. First up is the commander, the chief and the most important unit in the game. For the campaign at least, losing the commander means losing the mission. We cannot produce additional commanders, at least not in the campaign and not literally. The commander is the main construction unit to construct and repair units and structures, as well as reclaim resources from units, buildings, and the terrain, such as rocks, trees, dead units, dead buildings, etc. It is an excellent builder, the fastest one amongst all the construction units. The commander contributes a sizable amount of resource production and storage. More often than not, it's the only resource production and storage you have when you first start a mission. The commander can cloak itself by consuming energy. Although at 200 energy, it is a very expensive upkeep when the commander is idle, and 5 times more expensive when the commander is moving. In terms of the offensive, it has got 2 different weapons. First is the default weapon, the red laser. It's got average damage and doesn't function well as an entire weapon. However, the mainstay of the commander is the secondary weapon, known as the disintegrator gun, also commonly known as the D-gun. The D-gun is the strongest weapon in the game, even stronger than the nuclear weapon. The only drawback it has is that it cannot effectively hit any air units. The commander has a very decent health pool, the highest in its class and one of the highest overall. It's the only unit that can regenerate health by consuming energy. The commander also functions as a detection unit. Because it is also amphibious, it is probably the only land unit that has both radar and sonar detection. Before any further introductions, let me first explain how to interpret certain numbers and features shown on this stats page. Let's begin with the red box. It shows the amount of resources consumed and produced by the building or unit when it is in the default state, which is the idle or ready state. That is to say, for example, a combat unit isn't moving or firing, while a detection unit still has its detection switched on. Similarly, a resource production structure is still operating as per normal, but a unit production structure is not producing any units. In ready state, the commander is not cloaked, not regenerating health, not building anything, not firing its weapons. In this state, the commander produces 25 energy per second while consuming 1, and produces 1 metal while consuming 0 per second. Now let's look at the yellow box. It shows the additional resource consumptions by the unit or building, and in the case of structures, also shows the builder consumptions. Builder consumptions refer to the amount of energy per second required by each of the builders to build this structure. Next, the green box. Within here shows the ratings for attributes of interest of the building or unit, and an overall ratings comparison as shown in green, as well as a comparison between its ratings and others in its class as shown in red. For example, the commander's move speed is ranked 10th out of 44 units. Meanwhile, in its own class of Kbots, the commander's move speed is ranked 6th out of 11 Kbots. Similarly, looking at the DPS of its primary weapon, the red laser, it is ranked 25th out of 39 weapons used by units in general. In the meantime, that DPS puts the red laser at rank 6 out of 9 weapons used by Kbots. Finally, the blue box. For detection units, the sonar or radar range will be shown here, while for jammer units, the jamming range will be shown instead. In addition, the unit or building's footprint as well as the line of sight will also be shown. The line of sight will be displayed in a north, east, south, west configuration. The number of grids is obtained in-game through the use of construction space allocation blueprint and utilizes the tendency for the blueprint to snap into grids. The unit shown in the picture has a footprint of 2 × 2 grids, while the pink square shows the size of 1 grid. The unit's line of sight is indicated by the tiling of the blueprint to the edge of the fog of war. The yellow grid ruler indicates the number of grids in the line of sight of the unit, and that changes according to the unit's orientation. In example 1, we can see that the unit's line of sight is 7 grids north, 7 grids east, 5 grids south, 5 grids west. However, moving the unit a little bit, we will get example 2. 6 grids north, 7 grids east, 6 grids south, and 5 grids west. That's all. Back to more stats. The solar collector. The fundamental energy production structure. It has an energy production of 20 energy per second and is cheap enough in terms of build time and resource cost to be mass produced. I feel that it is a more reliable energy supplier than the wind generator, which I'll introduce in a few missions from now. The solar collector is one of the few, if not the only structure that has incoming damage reduction when it is closed. The metal extractor. Another fundamental resource production structure. The metal extractor should be built on metal deposits to properly produce optimal amount of metal. Building them on metal deposits produce anywhere between 0.8 to 2 metal per second in-game time. If not built on metal deposits, it could produce anywhere between 0 to X amount of metal, X being the so-called ground metal defined by the map. Some planets are made of metal and thus have no metal deposits because the land is metal. This also gives the maximum of 2.3 metal output per second on the metal extractor. Light laser tower. Its namesake tells all, provides decent defenses against early aggression but requires significant build time and resources to produce. It consumes 20 energy when firing, which is the energy produced by one solar collector. A unique trait about the LLT is that it's probably the only land structure that can be constructed by a construction ship. I rarely build it in the games I play. In the early game, I cannot afford the build time and the resource cost to build the LLT, while later in the game there are better defensive structure options available and mobile units are generally more preferable too. The vehicle plant produces tech level 1 vehicle units such as tanks. Vehicles are faster land units but have a slower turn rate and a slower acceleration rate. Vehicles cost less but have more HP or health points on average, with only one exception. The Weasel, a scout unit. It's the fastest land unit but it has the lowest HP, although that is properly compensated by its low production cost and production time. Instigator is an assault tank from the vehicle plant and one of the main units of the core faction. Like its name says, it instigates attacks. It's got average DPS and HP and better in bulk. But given its relatively low build time and cost, it can be mass produced in good time. Raider, medium assault tank. It's a tank, it tanks literally. Decent HP, move speed, but low DPS due to its low firing rate. It takes long to be destroyed, takes even longer to be produced. The Slasher, it has a katana, missile launcher. The missile launcher sounds good, but functions even better. It's got low DPS, but that's doubled against air units. It's very cheap and fast to mass produce. Okay, so having talked about the units and the resource system, you can see here that, it's 1300 in storage and 1300 in storage for energy as well. That's more compared to what we started with, which is 1000. That's because these vehicle plants, they each provide 100 in storage for each of these resources. I think I might have missed out that part in the stats page. In addition to that, you can see that the numbers in terms of resource production have increased. Of course, that's due to all these solar collectors and metal extractors. So you can check by clicking on them and looking at the bottom. I cannot move my mouse cursor away because that would make the stats disappear. So it's 20 as described in the stats page, and it's 2.3 here, 2.3 being the maximum that any metal extractor can give. But while the metal extractor is running, it actually costs 3 energy to run. Well, if I switch it off, It doesn't produce metal, but it doesn't consume energy. So let's put it back on. Solar collector in the off state, no energy produced. Switch it back on, that's 20. Alright, in addition, units also provide resources, such as this commander giving 25 energy and 1 metal, but to run a commander takes 1 energy. Weasel has got no consumption and production, while tanks such as raiders and instigators and even slashers, they do provide 1 energy when they are standing by, and 1 energy if they're moving is being consumed. But if they show as moving in terms of the status, but they are not physically moving, as you can see here, sometimes it's just getting stuck. The game is smart enough to calculate that as not moving, as opposed to the status showing moving, and therefore not consume energy. So it is good to produce more units, because when they are idle and not moving, they actually add on and contribute to your energy production. However, that is very volatile energy production, which is consumed as soon as all of this units start moving. So you can see here we have about 150 to 170 consumption, depending on whether the vehicle plant is actively producing. But let's move all the units. Suddenly you'll see that there's a spike. It goes up to 180. Let's move even more units. You see them. Oops. Okay. Shift key and left mouse click and drag to select multiple. Let's move a lot more. You see that suddenly it goes up to 190 and maybe even higher. Alright, they'll all be grouped for... no, it's okay. I've got group 3 properly set up, so alternate 3 to select group 3, and we'll move them in together with 1 and 2. Okay, one interesting thing about the status here, or the game implementation here, is that units are generally moving and firing at the same time if given a chance to do so. That's determined by their unit orders and unit maneuver status here. You can set your units to fire at will, in which they will encounter and fire upon enemy units within their range of fire. Hold fire is to not fire at all, even when fired upon, while return fire only fires when fired upon. On top of that, you also have the maneuver toggle, so it's just how far they chase enemies. I think, based on what I found, is that roam, they will chase an enemy until the enemy is dead. Hold position will make them not move at all, so they'll only fire based on the fire toggle, the aggression toggle, while maneuver allows your units to chase enemies a certain distance before returning to their defensive position, unless being told to move. So let's go in and attack them. You see that I'm actually shift queuing the movement paths, because there is still, I think it feels a little wonky in terms of the movement. units actually sometimes block each other, and when I task them to move in here, they actually get stuck along this wall. So we have to specifically tell them to move up here before moving in here. Okay, you can notice here that there's a wreckage here that's blocking a lot of my units. There's a pool of wreckages here blocking my units. That is one interesting aspect of the game, being that dead units don't just disappear like I mentioned. They become wreckages, and these wreckages actually can become a natural defense barrier. You see, my units have a problem finding their path in. So if you come up with a good defense as an enemy and you defend this gap properly, the units can keep firing outwards if you have got detection such as radar. But enemy units, or my units, have a problem entering this defensive position. Okay, they have found another way in. Whoops. Thanks, Slasher, for spoiling it, but okay. You can destroy wreckages though, but make sure your units are not too close nearby. As you can see, friendly fire, friendly damage that is actually adding on to the wreckage. Alright, that's enough. Move away. And then fire. Wreckages are surprisingly tanky. But in a way, it's true. I mean, it's quite realistic in that, you know, a functioning unit gets destroyed after taking a certain amount of damage and it can no longer function, therefore it becomes a wreckage. But to actually utterly destroy metal and other materials that build those units, that would take more time. Right. I've got many more units hanging out and chilling. So see, that's a problem with the pathing. It's stuck. So let's just group them all as group 5. Come here first, and then shift Q here, and then shift Q here. Okay. Another thing about this game is that it does aggression quite differently. Your units don't fire upon passive structures such as production structures and facilities such as this Kbot lab. It only fires on aggressive units and buildings. This can be very, very helpful. Suppose the case where we are tasked to capture the Kbot lab instead of actually destroying it. But watch out for collateral damage when enemy units or your own units are around the place, or when the Kbot lab becomes an obstacle if you're trying to fire across it, like this. Okay, now the radar is firing over the Kbot lab, but there are instances where it actually fires into the Kbot lab. Well, the trajectory of the projectile being affected by both the distance and the gravity of the map, as well as the elevation of the enemy unit or the target location. Now, before I finish this mission, it's already clogging up. Let's just stop production. Shift, right click to cancel in 5, or right click to cancel 1 by 1. Multiples of 5, I mean. Yeah. Right click to cancel 1, shift right click to cancel in multiples of 5, and holding shift left click will queue units in multiples of 5. Okay, so what is it about this commander that's funny? Is that it can actually cloak itself. We've got energy, so you can see here at the bottom that it consumes 200 energy to cloak. But if I move it, this thing goes haywire. Boom. It will toggle between cloak and uncloak because it's got not enough energy to support its cloaking. It's almost impossible to remain cloaked while moving. Also, if you hold shift, you can see this white circle. If any enemy units get into this white circle, the commander is revealed, whether you have energy or not. Yeah, let's uncloak it first. Let's look at what happens if we have enough energy to supply the cloaking. Okay, there's this vent here, which is the thermal vent. It's not applicable now, but in the later missions I'll talk more about it. Okay, I may have to skip the video while we get enough energy production going. But before I skip ahead, one more thing to note is, okay, let's pause this production first. Okay, no more production. I was totally incoherent here, so here's a post commentary. I press the spacebar here and you can see the total number of units is 169. That goes up to 170 as the commander plays down the blueprint of the solar collector. It shows that the building is considered a unit. Puts one more solar collector, that goes up to 171. Now I'm going to place one more and make it 172, but instead of completing it, we're going to wait for it to disappear and let the nanolith web or blueprint dwindle down to 0. Boom, 171. So it's kind of interesting that buildings themselves count towards the total units or total population. That prevents a game from probably overloading the system resources. This is a 1997 game, so I think one of the design considerations is that you want to prevent too many units in a game or too many assets in a game. That includes structures as well. Okay, I'll probably skip ahead until we've got 1000 energy in terms of production. Alright, we now have in excess of 1000 energy production. Let's try cloaking the commander again and then moving it. This time round there's enough energy production to counter the energy consumption and there's a net gain. Therefore, the commander remains cloaked. But be very careful though, while it's cloaked, if it does any form of action such as attack. It gets uncloaked and that's about 20 seconds in-game time for it to be recloaked if there is no recent aggression on the commander, such as the enemy attacking it or actions done by the commander, as well as this circle intrusion. Now, another thing, wow, there's a lot of things. Another thing that is unique is that the commander can capture enemy units or structures, given that we have got enough population to support it though. So it's 177. Look, it's captured and now this is ours. We can control it as per normal. We can also capture the Kbot lab, although our tasks I think is to destroy it, but let's try capturing it. The enemy production structure. Look, we can actually produce units from the enemy structure Well, let's just make one and expedite it. Making an enemy construction unit. Can we then construct from this construction unit? Yes, we can. Okay, enough spoilers. Good. Even though our task is to destroy the Kbot lab and all the units, let's just capture a few and destroy the rest. Any more? This is the energy storage. Okay, another thing is that some of these structures actually deal an area effect damage, like that. That's it. So we don't have to destroy it. We can capture and still win the game. Okay, let's continue and look at the score. Now I know the score is calculated by the number of units we kill multiplied by 50. 50 times 58 is 2,500 plus 400, 2,900, and that's what gives us the score. Nothing else matters. 50 times 62, that is 3,100, and yep, it goes here. So let's first save the game. Core M2 and another post commentary. Okay, we have the kill count and the loss counts. We killed 58, they killed 62, therefore they're higher scores. We lost 96 and they only lost 61. Now the interesting thing here is that we lost 96 but they only killed 62. This is probably the result of friendly fire, collateral damage, and it can be seen from the AI also. We killed 58, they lost 61. However, as an AI, they're definitely better at managing friendly fire and collateral damage, therefore the difference is smaller. Let's now take a look at the energy and metal produced as well as the excess energy and excess metal. How this is calculated is that, for example, we have a solar collector producing 20 energy per second. So for every second that passes in the game, till the end of the game, this 20 is calculated every second. For 10 seconds, we've made 200 energy. In total, we produced 2.265,244 energy, while we produced 84,711 metal. The metal extractor produces 2.3 metals per second, but there were a few seconds we switched off the metal extractor. Upon clicking the off button immediately, that metal production is no longer calculated. And when we switch on the metal extractor again, the calculation continues from that point onwards. How the excess energy is calculated is that the system first calculated the amount of energy consumed, and that is by adding together all the lump sums of the energy consumed. For example, producing a weasel takes up 575 energy and 38 metal. So this amount is contributing to the resources consumed. Even if an enemy fires upon a unit that is currently being produced, that unit just comes out from the factory with a proportion of the health remaining after deducting the amount of damage taken. In addition to the production costs, there is also movement costs, weapon costs such as firing of the commander's D-gun and the commander's cloaking. All these were all added into the consumption. Again, for example, the commander takes up 1000 energy per second. So for every second that the commander remains cloaked, this 1000 is added into the consumption. At the end of the game, the consumed energy is deducted from the energy produced. That gives us an excess energy of 1.754,132 energy. We also have 52,417 metal remaining. So deducting the excess energy from the energy produced, we can roughly estimate about 500,000 energy consumed and 30,000 metal consumed. That's all I have for now. Have a nice day.